Well, we're on the eve of the election, and I think it's no secret around here that lots of people, ever since Nigel Farage got back into the race, have been putting their hopes in reform, as if not winning the election, because that doesn't seem possible at all, forming a patriotic populist alternative party to continue assembling the plane as it flies in the next 5 years. There have been some disappointing messaging recently, bit schizophrenic in my opinion, and so
it's quite a lot for me. Sadly, they were doing really well, and then it feels like Richard Tice reasserted himself and said, "Have you considered that our election tactics should be we're not racist?"
There is discord behind the scenes at Reform about that.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yes. So I'm actually here to present that side, lambast them for it, and also hopefully provide a bit of reassurance that if you're still considering casting a Reform protest vote, because I wasn't until Nigel showed up, frankly, and now I'm still going to do it, even if some of the candidates are not up to stuff. I think it's still fair because after the election, our guys are in and should be able to reform, so to speak. Now, if you want to watch the election live, obviously head over to lotuseaters.com or our Rumble account and watch our Zero Seats stream with many guests. I think we start at 7 and end at about 5 in the morning. Lord help us.
Maybe even later than that.
Depends if I'm still alive. And if you want to send video comments and questions and predictions, you can sign up for 50% off your first 3 months, or you can even upgrade if you aren't currently a gold tier subscriber with the code ZeroSeats, all capitals, no spaces, and we look forward to seeing you there. So I thought I'd kick off with some of the polls to start off with. So these are the final polls going into the election. This is from Redfield and Wilton. So the current numbers are Labour at 41%, Conservative at 22%, Reform at 16%, Lib Dems at 10%, Greens at 6%, and then the other Celtic nationalist sectarian parties knocked off.
The SNP don't care about Celts.
True, fair point, yes. Well, they basically masquerade ethnic hatred of the English in progressive minoritarian concerns.
Oh, yeah, of course. So you hate the English? Well, you best let in all the Indians.
Yeah, it's not even white people at the bottom. It's the Scots and then the English.
They go, do you know who else hates the English? Pakistanis. Don't you want more of them?
Yeah, but the last time they tried to make one a leader, it didn't work out very well.
No, it didn't.
Anyway, so I put these into electoral calculus, and this translates to the seat numbers as follows. So there's going to be 468 Labour seats, 69 Conservative seats, 67 Lib Dem seats, 6 for Reform, including Clacton, that's Farage, and 3 for the Greens. So that'll be Brighton, Hove, Bristol Central, and wherever other Portland we have in this awful island. So there's been more, of course. There's Salvation.
Can we take this moment to just hammer home, as always, that first past the post is an absolute garbage voting mechanism in many ways.
Despite your Americanism, I agree with you.
If this is how, if they get a certain amount of votes and they only get, 6 seats out of it, it's pathetic.
The issue with proportional representation, though, and I am apathetic about the voting system either way, is that it forces you to create coalition governments that end up dragging you towards compromise and left-wing policies. I mean, we see the internal turmoil that Geert Wilders has recently experienced, where he's only just been able to form a government as of yesterday, despite winning, back in November, the mandate. So there are problems with both systems, but I anticipate that by Sunday, there'll be a massive debate as to whether to scrap first past the post for proportional representation because of the vote share reform we'll get and command a certain amount of public consciousness. So I think it'll be something that comes out ahead. Anyway, so Salvation have done their one right beforehand, and they're predicting 484 Labour seats, 64 Conservative seats, 61 Lib Dem seats, 10 seats for the SNP, 7 for Reform, and that's the number that Reform themselves think are probably most likely. 3 for Plaid Cymru and 3 for the Greens. JL Partners has done one. Again, partnering with the Rest is Politics podcast. Are you guys familiar with that by any chance? That's Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell's podcast.
Oh, I actually saw clips from that. Yeah,
unfortunately so. So there's been some funny things going on with the JLP polls as soon as they partnered with the Rest is Politics, because they've consistently had Reform lower than expected. So I wonder if there's something shaky going on there. I covered that on my show last week. So suspicions, but let's look at their polling numbers no matter what. So this is going to be 442 Labour seats, 98 Conservative seats, so far from the 0 that lots of people are hoping for, 63 for the Lib Dems, 6 for Reform, and 3 for the Greens. So it looks like Reform are going to get about 6 or 7 seats, unless there's this massive unrepresented upset demographic that hasn't yet been registered in the polls, which Nigel is suggesting, but we'll see.
There've been upsets before.
It is true. I think probably their vote share is more spread out across the country than concentrated, unless you're in Ashfield or Clacton.
That's why the Lib Dems, who poll at sort of similar percentages as Reform, sometimes less, tend to be able to get a lot more projected seats because they have their support bases concentrated in certain areas.
Absolutely. Now, what's quite funny, though, is the bookies are more bullish on reform than the Conservatives. So this is from Betfred, and they set the markets as follows. And Betfred have said, Reform UK have actually overtaken the Conservatives in the odds concerning who would be more likely to unseat Labour overall, even though they're consistently polling less than them.
What kind of information are these guys basing it off?
I think sometimes bookies will change their odds depending on how people are betting. So it could be there are lots of Reform UK supporters being very optimistic and they're betting that they're going to win, and that might shape the odds. I don't know. Possibly. I don't necessarily know how they're calculated.
And also, this could be more representative, because Farage has essentially boasted that they're going to get more votes than the Conservatives. And I don't think that's impossible. And this could be more representative because election polls have two purposes. They either register public sentiment or they shape public sentiment. This is what I think the JLP polls have been doing. They've been trying to shape public sentiment towards Labour, away from Reform, towards even the Conservatives for the sort of disaffected Tory voters that might break for Farage.
Well, you said that the JLP were the ones that were partnered with Rory Stewart.
Politics. Well,
Rory Stewart, I've seen a clip that was played on UO last night where Rory Stewart, who has possibly the worst vocal physiognomy I've ever heard, by the way, he was saying that if Tories have a complete wipeout, then he wants to basically try and reform it with all of the One Nation wets again. So he seems to want there to be some chance to make Tories even worse, because he's going to take from this, clearly we weren't gay and left-wing enough.
In The Guardian, he did an interview where he said he's going to vote either Lib Dem, Green or Labour.
Well, that just says it all, doesn't it?
The former Conservative leadership candidate in 2019 running against Boris Johnson is now saying he'll vote Green. And JLP is actually headed up by the guy who ran his 2019 leadership candidacy. So, shaky things there.
I think that there's something quite insidious going on there, because he has options to the left of Reform. Plenty of them. That's where most of the party. Most of the political spectrum is to the left of Reform. So I don't know what he's complaining about. Why do you need a more left-wing Conservatives when, they'll just become the Green Party then, won't they?
As if they weren't already.
It sounds like what he would be wanting to do is reform the Conservatives again with Cameronism on steroids.
Yes.
Which, I mean, Cameronism is already why we're here, right?
Yeah, but it's unobstructed Cameronism, basically.
Yeah,
These people will never learn. So the Uniparty are getting desperate. So as I covered on Monday, there have been a bunch of smears against Farage, including the Channel 4 thing, including the BBC Question Time audience being absolutely packed out, as we recently covered. I've got some updates on the stories there. First, on the Channel 4 sting involving Andrew Parker, the strange actor who decided to act like a Cockney gangster. This is a piece that's been written by Stephen Edgington. He's done some digging and spoken to some people that were actually at Clacton in the constituency office and at the event at the time. And they've said that one Reform source said about Parker and then two of the Channel 4 undercover filmers, who people are still trying to identify, that they were obsessed with Tommy Robinson, going up to random volunteers and trying to start a conversation about him. No one took the bait and they were given short shrift. When they weren't doing that, they were talking about George Floyd for some reason. It was all a bit strange, and they told people they'd never done any political campaigning before, so I think people gave them the benefit of the doubt. They're literally walking up to people like Oblivion NPCs and going, have you heard of the High Elves? Like, how unnatural do you think that was? And no wonder they couldn't get anyone to bite on camera, and they had to resort to using Parker's exaggerated smears because, nobody around there thought that was normal.
They must be on fentanyl to believe that they would fall for that.
So when Carl presented me the evidence for the actor plant last week, I found the evidence somewhat uninspiring and unconvincing.
I think you misheard that, frankly. I think because you didn't hear the two contrast images.
I did.
Carl failed to.
I did hear the contrast, and I didn't find it to be that much of a contrast. It sounded. I don't think he sounded that posh when he wasn't talking in his actor voice. But what other evidence is there? Because obviously Stephen has spoken to these people,
yes,
and they said that anybody who was anybody wasn't taking the bait from these two very obviously suspicious people. So what else is there?
So he was more pronounced in the video where he was talking straight to camera versus the footage of him pretending to be a Cockney gangster. On his own website, he says he usually plays mafia and villain types.
Okay.
There's also another profile where he says he specialises in secret filming. Those have all been deleted now. There are multiple videos of him on TikTok playing that same racist Alf Garnett character, which have now all been deleted. And he himself denied being an actor to The Telegraph when he was quoted, and then people went and found his pages, and then has since been deleted. And then how come Hope Not Hate are obsessed with doxing Roareg nationalists and Lomez, but they have this guy's information, and it took random Antifa watch accounts on Twitter to find this out, but not all of the left-wing accounts that could have easily found that he's an actor and could have found he's a union member. Why has no one gone after him yet on that side?
Okay, that all sounds far more convincing.
Yeah, he was also a member of the Equity Union, if that's right, which, equity, that's not exactly a soft word, is it?
It's just the sort of actors union name. To be
is it really?
It's been that way since before, 2020 and the critical race theory. Well, they're obviously very left wing because they're an actors union,
of course.
Yeah. Because I at first didn't think it would be completely out of the realm of possibility that there would be some right wing actors out there who might decide to do some canvassing. But with all of that evidence there that you've said as well, yes, I'm more convinced now.
Also, he only showed up on that day. Nobody knew him.
Oh, okay.
He hung around the constituency office and said, I've got a massive car. Why don't you guys come with? And it just so happens that the 2 Channel 4 filmers got straight in his car.
Oh, okay. All right.
Really weird. So they've actually put complaints into, I think, the Electoral Commission, also to the police about it. They're investigating the production company because it could well be the production company lied and Channel 4 didn't know anything about this. But Channel 4 themselves, they've said, we didn't know Parker was an actor. We just trusted these guys. We'll see what comes out in the wash.
I will say from my own experience learning about journalism in university, they basically do tell you to be scumbags. They tell you if you're trying to make a hit piece on somebody who's a legitimate person, basically you follow them with a camera once you've got permission for months, make them think that you're their friend, and then when they slip up, you basically cut everything off, you get the footage of them slipping up, and you turn that into a big hit piece. So it wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility at all for some scummy production company to just lie.
Well, this is what Channel 4 did in the early 2000s with their BMP hit piece on Mark Collett, if anyone remembers that. Because they went around with Collett pretending to do a profile on him as a young BMP activist, and when he decided to say some obvious Nazi apologetics, they then confronted him with the footage and then he flipped. But my point is, if they were able to get Collett just off the cuff saying that, but nobody except Andrew Parker, professional actor, saying that, then it clearly shows that Reform UK campaign is not subject to the kind of smears they've levelled at it. So, silly stuff. So another one of the dirty tricks that's being alleged as well is, have you heard about all these defections that have been going on? There are 2 former Tories who went to Reform UK and have now defected again back to the Tories.
They're a double agent.
That's actually the allegation. So these candidates are Liam Booth Isherwood, who was the candidate in Earwash, and Georgie David, the candidate for West Ham and Beckton, who have both said that the vast majority of their candidates are racist, misogynistic and bigoted. They're apparently not the top leadership brass, which is a bit confusing. Reform are currently alleging they were bribed to do this by CCHQ, and part of the evidence of this is that Farage, back in 2019, Steve Baker was part of this little cohort trying to do this, by the way, so he should definitely lose his seat, had offered Farage and other candidates, if they stood down when they were part of the Brexit Party, peerages and Farage himself a knighthood, and he said, go stuff it, and then eventually stood down anyway without taking any of the offers because he wanted Boris to win and Brexit to be done. Major mistake. There you go. Instantly, these defections were plastered across the front page of the BBC with these pre-prepared media statements. It does smell a bit dodgy, and so all of that's detailed in this interview here with Richard Tice that you can watch in your own time. The reason I bring it up is to transition a little bit, because nobody on Reform's organic base, like we 3 chaps around the table, are bothered by these smears. We're really not fussed by it. We know the establishment media is going to play all these dirty tricks. The defence against it is what we're concerned with, not the fact that you're pointing out that there's some obvious chicanery at play, but when Richard Tice comes out and starts saying, well, we're the party of true diversity because both of our deputy leaders, Ben Habib, who I rather like, by the way, is half Pakistani, so he's an ethnic minority, and David Bull, who I also quite like, is a gay man, so don't worry, we're a truly diverse party. As soon as I hear diversity, I think I just don't want to vote for that.
Yeah, don't play on their terms.
Yeah, well, that's what Farage has been doing the past week and a half, is that he's been defending himself, but under the terms and through the lens of the ideology of the left. You don't need to do that. If you're a genuine alternative, you don't need to justify yourself to the ideology of your opponents. That's ridiculous. That's a losing battle. That's why we've been losing on the right for so long. That's why all of the cultural institutions have been captured, because of exactly that. And it's really quite frustrating that our one hope of actually having meaningful political engagement in the system seems to be falling short. Yeah, capitulating.
Also, I can speak from my own experience and then also speak to the experience that's been reported by people like Morgoth himself. I wasn't planning on voting. People like Morgoth weren't planning on voting. But then the Reform Manifesto came out. And even old, cynical Morgoth said, I don't know, this is looking like a pretty good manifesto, actually. I saw it and thought, oh my goodness, that looks good. And it drew me back in. And the reason that it did that is because it's a right-wing manifesto. It's saying, deport the foreign criminals, put massive restrictions on immigration into the country, take away all the benefits to foreigners who aren't being productive in the country, so that it's a soft way of encouraging them to leave, increase the tax allowance on income to £20,000, scrap all net zero. All of these very sensible, reasonable policies are what I want to hear, because it's essentially a more positive vision for the future.
It's a good start.
From our own values. Yes, it certainly is a good start. What I don't want to hear is our one selling point is we're the actually diverse party. We're the not racist party. I don't care. I actually do not care if the media calls you racist. I care that you have a vision for the future of this country that benefits me, my people, and benefits my family, my friends, and it doesn't benefit the regime as it exists right now. It doesn't benefit all of the mercenaries who come to this country to try and steal our taxes off us. It doesn't benefit all of the people who have been trying to destroy and undermine our culture and history.
Likewise. And Farage, for a little bit of information on this, Farage himself redrafted the Reform Manifesto 2 days before publishing. And I've got a good source on that. So he is the one that forwarded all of these ideas. And I will say there's some internal discord within the Reform camp, because Farage is not really on board with this type of messaging. The only time he's really trotted it out, and I'll mention this later, is this Zaya Yousef chap who's been buying his way on stage. The side that is very on brand for the we're the diverse party, look, we aren't racist, here's a brown man, is Tyson Paul Oakden, the sort of vestige of being managers before Farage stepped in. And frankly, look, if you can have the courage of your convictions to acquit yourself, to know, no, all of these smears are frankly defamatory, and actually my constituency that I want to impress is not the media class, it's left behind white working class people in places like Clacton, or aspirational young men like you or I who have just done the right thing, saved up, and want a wife and kids and just work hard and have a sense of national belonging, then you don't need to pander to minoritarian politics and have someone who's brown or someone who's gay or someone who's an immigrant and a Muslim stand up and say your opinions because it's like regime-endorsed armor plating. They're never going to give you that armor plating. They'd rather see you dead than win the election.
If you're, important in reform, I think it's worth to bear in mind this turn of phrase. If you fight a pig in the mud, you both get dirty and the pig enjoys it. It's exactly that, right? If you engage in this kind of politics, you're going to lose.
If you want some examples of this kind of politics, I have collated them here for you.
Oh dear.
Here's this infamous
the cringe.
Video. They've reposted it yesterday, and they reposted it to YouTube after all of the criticism. This is just sort of really ignorant boomerism. I can't put it any other way. It's being very pig-headed and not being responsive to the base, who, like us, would actually be megaphones for your message if you just stop pissing us off.
Well, it's Tories 2.0, and I don't want to destroy the Tories to have them replaced by Tories again.
What, like this?
Apparently, we're all racists. Apparently, we're all bigots. Apparently, we're all xenophobes. Apparently, we're all far right. Apparently, we hate foreigners or people with different coloured skin. And yet...
All right, you get the idea.
I've had enough.
Yeah, also...
Make it end. Make it stop.
Ben Habib being the first one on there, I can guarantee he doesn't like that. Because Ben Habib is the one that's going on GB News saying the indigenous English population have been erased. I think his mum was English. So he has an ancestral tie to this place and is very deferential to the host population. And so I don't think he likes being spoken about as if he's the token shield for any accusations of racism.
Hold up a picture of him and go, look, brown, brown.
Ben doesn't like that, so it's a bit demeaning to do that to your own deputies. And then there's other schizophrenic messaging from, weirdly enough, the party that took in Lee Anderson when he was kicked out the Tories for saying that Sadiq Khan's far too cosy to Islamists. Something quite brave and bold and true to say, to then endorse that, but then also celebrate things like this, which is just random African drumming.
Average reform voter, right here.
Cummy Druckler fans, just
You brought them back.
He did mention this, actually.
It's very... Richard Tice, again, quite retweeting this, fantastic. No, it's not fantastic to see. Look, frankly, if polite house guests would like to be fellow travellers in an enterprise to restore the greatness of Britain, they're more than welcome as long as they defer to the host native population. But it shouldn't be the tip of the spear that you say, look, brown people are validating us. Because I don't judge my self-esteem or the validity of my policies based on if someone from Africa who arrived a couple of years ago says, yeah, all good, mate. No, I don't, actually. I just think what's good for me and my neighbourhood and my constituency and my congregation and my nation. I don't need validation from ethnic and sexual minorities to feel good about my policies. You shouldn't either. And then there's another one.
I mean,
this is a reform candidate, and I have to play the music.
They've just moved in. These are all the removal bands.
Okay, that's enough of that.
I mean, let's be honest. This is inevitable with the way demographics are changing in this country. The second that you become a multicultural, read multi-ethnic society, electoral politics just becomes a game where you see who you can pander to, which ethnic group you can pander to.
Clientele group, yes. Yeah, it's very frustrating. And speaking of clientelism, we have this example, and I drew a lot of criticism for this when I decided to quote retweet and say we need some cool heads here. But this is friend of the show, Dan Wooten, saying how amazing Muslim entrepreneur Zaya Yousef's speech at this recent conference at Birmingham was. Yousef basically brought his way onto the stage and wanted a platform. And he also recently was then immediately given a GB News spot as one of Michelle Dewberry's panelists, which is dubious. As I said, more than welcome in the movement, financing the legitimate spokespeople who have already been there. But no, he's not a political rising star. And no, the people in white working class towns like Clacton, who see Farage as an avatar, considerate of their concerns, will not feel represented by a Muslim man. I would not vote for this man, just as I wouldn't vote for Rishi Sunak for being a Hindu. I don't feel represented by him. I'm not going to do it. And so Reform are very foolish if they put this guy up as has now been suggested within the space of a week, a successor to Nigel Farage after 2029. This is a very stupid idea. No, genuinely. This is an internal conversation. This is a stupid idea, and you will hemorrhage support for it.
Have you considered deport the English?
This is
what's going to happen.
Deport me to Australia for free. Oh no!
Okay, so they're not going to win over the Anglo-Saxons with this. That's the core constituency that Farage is going for with his country gent / pub-going football fan get-up, which is authentic. So who instead could they win over? Well, this is encouraging. Here's a JLP poll that I found quite interesting. Reform are in second place with 16 to 17-year-olds and joint first with men. Now, that whole there is a Zoomer uprising thing going on that I've been predicting for quite a few months now, that you've documented over on the European continent.
Yes. AFD was massively popular with German youths.
As is Jordan Bardella in France. Over here, as Farage has been predicting, because he's doing good numbers on TikTok, turns out that young men really like Farage. Now, Aaron Bastani did some investigative journalism, and I have to play this clip. And credit to Aaron for giving them a really fair shake here. Anyone that criticised him for this interview is, I think, needlessly silly. Why do young men like Farage so much? Is it that they've been manipulated by Russian bots, or is it they just notice patterns? So I'm just going to play this quick clip here.
England's England. And sometimes I don't even want to be here.
Why is that? Bad. Well, it's getting worse.
Too many bloody foreigners. You look around, there's a foreigner. No more England. Might as well name it something else. Hell.
Hell? Why hell?
There's too many foreigners.
Get that man on the show.
What's that?
Immigrants are jarring.
What does that mean, jarring?
Annoying.
Flag of the regime in the background there.
Homeless English people not getting housed.
Hands out.
But you have immigrants that come that are illegal and they get housed. It's a joke.
So just illegal. You're saying just illegal.
Illegal immigrants.
But legal. I'm talking. I just asked that. Just about legal
Yeah,
migrants.
but even if they're legal immigrants, they still shouldn't be put over English people. No. We spend too much tax money on immigrants, and I think that's a joke. And we should worry about our own people before others.
Do you think the political class generally are doing that then?
No. I think the Conservative Party is an absolute joke, and young people in this country don't have a voice, and it makes me sick.
Mandem's got a point,
If you could vote, lads, who would you vote for?
Who would I vote for? Yeah. Reform UK, probably.
Yeah. That's the one. Reform UK. Yes, mate. Yes. And get rid of that Rishi Sunak, Prime Minister. Get rid of him.
Water mug.
Yes.
So the media. You would say
You
that
hear him
people
in
that
the
vote Reform
background.
UK,
What a mug.
older, boomers, racists.
Reform UK though.
But hold on one sec. But we've got a young guy, mixed heritage,
Yep.
who's saying Reform UK. So what are those people wrong about? What attracts you to Reform UK?
Reform UK is that, like, if you're an actual English citizen, you actually have a voice in what happens in this country. But then with a Conservative Party, we don't ever get a voice. So Conservatives, just rich people doing what they want to make the most money that they can, which has always been for ages. But Reform UK, actual working class English people have a voice in what happens in the country.
So, I don't understand then why. I mean, of course I do, because Richard Tice wants to be respected in the Westminster Dinner Party circuit. If you're winning over young Englishmen with the message of, hey, young Englishman, I'm actually attentive to your concerns, why you would then go, you know who we really need to win over? Random migrants who aren't going to vote for us anyway.
Yeah, I still find it interesting that there was a mixed race kid show up there and support reform, because again, it's startling to me to see people of mixed heritage who identify more with the English side of their heritage. That's actually quite rare to see, but fair play to the kid. Just get your hands out of your pants, all right? Conduct yourself with some manners.
It's about a question of belonging, and that kid clearly sees his local area as his home. He sees England as his home. He has an ancestral connection to the place. So rather than pandering to a migrant class of transient anywheres, as the Conservative and Labour Party want to do, why don't you just hone in on the particular constituency that see themselves as inextricable to England, as, frankly, Ben Habib does, which is why it's kind of insulting you're just using him as, here's our token brown. Like, that's not good.
One thing I will ask, you pointed out the age demographics before. I'm interested, among 16 to 17-year-olds, what's the ethnic breakdown of that?
Much more diverse.
Well, yeah, that's the thing that I'm thinking is much more diverse, which is probably why it's still slanted so heavily towards Labour. Because I saw Jess Gill posting earlier that about 1/3 of all children born in the UK at the moment are of foreign background, are born to immigrant mothers. So I wouldn't be surprised if the 16 to 17-year-olds are that same way, which means that in all likelihood that 23% of 16 to 17-year-olds looking for reform, who are polling for them, are probably overwhelmingly white.
That, and also there might be a bit of crossover considering the Tate brothers keep responding underneath Farage's posts.
Do they?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, I think it's probably also the TikTok campaigns that I was talking about last week.
Politics by vibe.
I showed a bit of this last week as well, and these two girls here, they say that they're going to be voting, or at least everybody they know is voting reform. And he asks them, how have they found all of this information out? Where are they getting this from? And they say, oh yeah, they're getting it on TikTok.
Yeah, but the thing is, they're noticing it in the street. So that's the guy on the bike. They're just seeing their local area being flooded by milling foreigners.
Yeah, hell is too many foreigners.
I want that on a t-shirt. Looking that up online and immediately finding Farage, as I put on the caption on this clip. So you're getting these people flow to you because of your organic message. So why change the message to suddenly go, we're not racist, look, here are brown people. Terrible, terrible idea. I mean, just before, because I understand we're running out of time, just before we wrap up, so Allison Pearson went down to Clacton and interviewed Farage on, obviously, the eve of the election, and she spoke to a guy, 18-year-old guy called Sam, who lives in Clacton. And he's learning to be a carpenter and he's got a girlfriend and doing the right thing. And he said the reason he's voting for Farage, because his granddad, who was 98, died a week ago, spoke often about the Lancaster bombers during the war. He served with the Lancaster bombers. And he said, he talked about the time that this country pulled together, and I think we've lost that. So obviously Farage being deferential to the D-Day service rather than Rishi Sunak has incentivized him to vote for reform. And when she asked him, what do you think of Sunak? And this is very telling. He just went, twat. What do you think of Starmer? Twat, who will make the wokies even worse. These people talk about gender at school. We got it the whole time. Me and my mates, we hate it. Shut up. I don't tell anyone what I do in bed with my girlfriend. Why do we have to hear what they do? It's just not normal. And so they said, okay, well, why do you like Nigel then? And he just went, because he's not afraid. That is the man that you should be seeking to win over. That is the man whose message yours is resonating with, rather than, oh, we need infinite legions of people that have arrived here yesterday and don't have a deep ancestral connection. And you can tell this is working because Conservatives are petrified, because in this interview, Farage was asked about, oh, what happens when you wipe out all the good Conservatives like Jacob Rees-Mogg and Priti Patel and Kemi Badenoch? And Farage cut her off and just went, Badenoch is very unpleasant. She, Rocco Forte threw a party at Brown's Hotel, and I was looking forward to talking to her. We had an unpleasant exchange, and Kemi was really aggressive, and she said, how dare you? If you come back, you're going to split the vote. You've got to realise that you're going to let us down very, very badly. Sorry, us. He doesn't have a petition obligation to continue the treacherous party that is the Tories. And Kemi seems to know this because In the Daily Express, she lamented that voting reform risks losing hundreds of thousands of Tory MPs for a generation.
That's the point.
Yeah, that's the entire point. You deserve to be punished. Like, there are one or two good Tory MPs, as we mentioned, with Miriam Cates or someone like Andrea Jenkins, but the brand itself is contaminated by the exact types like Kemi Badenoch. Kemi Badenoch is not your girl, no matter how many times this podcast has stumped for her.
The only good Tory is an unseated Tory, one might say.
So we'll finish on the delusions. Sunak is insisting that the hung parliament is within their grasp. I don't think he's taken a look at any of the polls
Madness,
anytime soon. And I don't think he believes this because he trotted out, of all people, Boris Johnson yesterday. The man they actively deposed, the only one capable of winning a majority, has now been trotted out to stump for people in the party that he himself doesn't like and call everyone a Putin apologist.
Also possibly one of the most disgusting and despicable traitors, despite his positive press image that he does have sometimes when the press wants to present him as he's just a plucky, bumbling patriot. No, he's a disgusting individual who no one should ever have voted for, who has always had it in for the people of this country, who one of his biggest projects, as I covered recently, was the fact that he's always been plumping to try and get amnesty for illegal immigrants, at least in London, stretching out to the rest of the country. And Calvin asked a fair question. Why was I bringing that up at such a late hour? It was because of the fact I knew at some point the Tories were going to trot him out to try and win votes.
Yes, so just to finish on that, don't remodel yourself in the vein of Boris Johnson, per Richard Tice's strange campaigning in Ukraine and saying we're the party of diversity. Instead, look to those white working class left behind areas and those young lads who are stumbling across on TikTok Nigel's message and automatically resonating with it. And if those in the Tory camps, like Suella Braverman, on the eve of the election, publishes a piece in the Telegraph saying, yeah, we lost and we deserve to lose, if your enemies are afraid and they think you're much further right or scarier a boogeyman than you actually are, then live up to that image that the enemies of yours have in their head.
Hi folks, thanks for watching. Because this election is going to be such a momentous one, where the Conservatives are going to get absolutely crushed, we are doing an all-night election stream on Rumble on the 4th of July, starting 7 p.m. British time. We're going to have tons of guests, we're going to have tons of fun, and you can come and sign up to lotus.com using promo code 0seats and get 50% off the gold tier for 3 months, and send us video comments and chats throughout the night because we're going to want to hear your input. And to mark this momentous occasion, you can get your 0 Seats merch from our store.